Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. As promised, we're working our way through a series of early music things that collectors should really have in their collections. And one of the very earliest, if not the earliest, no, it's not quite, but it's the very earliest, is the music of Perotin. I mean, nobody really knows what his real name was, and nobody really knows what he actually wrote. We know some things that are attributed to him by a guy named Anonymous 4. Remember Anonymous 4, the music group who did equal-voiced polyphony, a group of ladies? Well, Perotin didn't do that, but Perotin, in the way that Anonymous 4 did it anyway, but Perotin was a member of what they call the Notre Dame School. He had a predecessor, Leonin. And between the two of them and the other composers whose names we don't know, they created Western polyphony and thus the basis for Western music as we know it today. Believe it or not, we can actually trace it back to its origins, at least to its notated origins, because just as important as the style of music that they wrote was the fact that they evolved a system of writing it down. And that system of writing it down is still the basis that we use today for writing music down, which is really kind of fascinating. And what that means effectively is that, I mean, it's not obviously exactly the same, and things the notes had square heads and they were done a little differently, but the bottom line is that it is theoretically possible for any reasonably well-trained musician today to perform or understand anything that was written between today and the 12th century. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it, because we're talking about 800-900 years of music that has been consistently notated according to a relatively standard set of notational standards. And so it's like really, really important. And that's how Western music happened. And that's what distinguishes so much of what Western music is from music of other cultures, which is largely monophonic, that is, as in Gregorian chant. And however it may be orchestrated, it usually consists of a single line of melody, which allows for lots of free improvisation and whatnot. But it's not the same thing as writing things down, because what that allowed you to do, in the case of Perotin, was to write 4-part harmony, 3-part harmony. Leonin did a lot of 3-part stuff. Perotin did a lot of 4-part stuff with some 3-part stuff. All of these things had names depending on the relationships of the parts to each other. One of the most famous of those names is organum. Organum means you have long, sustained notes with the other parts moving in a quicker rhythmic tempo, basically above or below or however he does it. But you've got the parts intertwining at different rates. The opposite of organum was conductus. A conductus is kind of like a song. I mean, as we would know it today. That is each part sings the same word on the same note, or at least the harmony moves similarly in the same basic rhythm. So that's music as we know it. It either moves similarly or it moves differently. And if it's differently, you've got organum. And if there are different types of organum, there's discantus and, repulsus and obstreperousness and all kinds of things. But essentially, that's what it is. Either the parts move at different speeds or in different note values, or they move in similar note values. And then you've got however many parts you have. So this is the earliest guy who wrote 4-part harmony, which is the fundamental basis of like all of Western music that's come after. It's really, really fascinating, and we can perform it and we can hear it. Now, the performance of this music obviously involves a degree of speculativeness. No one knows what it really sounded like, how many voices sang to a part, and there are issues of transcription of, the notes and whatnot. But basically, people are kind of agree on what it is. And there are a couple really major pieces by Perotin, which are fabulously performed here. Here's the point. By the Hilliard Ensemble on ECM. Those pieces are called Viderunt Omnes. That's one of them. And the other big one is Sederunt Principes. Now, what that means, it's Latin, it's liturgical. You can look up the words, they're in here. But these are big works. They're about 12 minutes each. There's also the Alleluia Nativitas, which is 8 minutes. And this particular collection has other works of the Notre Dame School, which are anonymous. We don't know who wrote them, but it's a good bit of what we know of Perotin, because the only way we know that he wrote this stuff is that, well, here's the story. His earlier buddy, Leonin, if they knew each other, we don't know, but Leonin wrote something called the Magnus Liber, the great book of liturgical music. And Perotin added to it and revised it. And so that stuff exists. And Anonymous 4, who was apparently an English music student studying in Paris, wrote about Perotin, and that his major works were this, and this. And that's how we know what he wrote. There is no other way. And we take this guy at his word that these are the pieces by Perotin. But the bottom line is, if you're going to start listening to classical music, Western classical music, you got to have this. It's the beginning. It's like you've got to have Monteverdi's Orfeo. It's like the first opera. What is kind of amazing about these things historically is that we do know the origins of many, many things, really the beginnings. And as far as we can tell, or we have discovered, this is the beginning. And so it should be the beginning of your classical music collection. You may not want to play it every day, but you should hear it. It's quite primal sounding. It really is. It has a lot of open fourths and fifths, parallel things like that you don't hear so much later. But it greatly influenced the minimal composers, like Steve Reich, for example, was influenced by Perotin, and some other contemporary people have gone all the way back to find inspiration in this very, very early, but in its way, for what it was, revolutionary and sophisticated music that's well worth your time and attention. So give it a shot and see what you think. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.